Hopefully I won't get a parking ticket. Yeah, so Leica and cheap aren't exactly two words that end up on the same page together without the word not before one of those words. But you might be surprised that you can actually get a Leica for a reasonable price. You could say cheap. But which ones do you go for? Let me show you.
Yes, let's take a look, but before that...
This video is sponsored by Wirestock.
Make money from your photos, video and vector files by uploading to Wirestock. They get distributed to all major marketplaces and it's free to sign up. Royalty rates are higher than usual and Wirestock takes just 15% only when it sells. Get started with the link below.
But there's no better time than the present to get a Leica because of the prices. Trust me, because I've had all of them. I know how cheap they are now, and I didn't buy them at the cheapest point. Not when they're brand new, because that would be stupid. I bought it when they're still expensive, but not outrageously expensive. Some bargains to be had.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah?
Yeah, really.
And they're all in Dan's bag.
No, you got.
Yeah, well, this is kind of affordable.
It's affordable if you try.
Hold your horses, why not start with the cheapest option like the one in Dan's hand first?
The weird thing about this M8 is it's got a crop of 1.3? 1.3 or 1.33?
1.33.
0.33. So my maths is bad. That 21 is basically a
28. The full viewfinder is probably about 28, isn't it?
roughly. I mean, you do lose a bit. Push your eye right into the corner and sort of look around the frame as much as possible, and that's kind of an approximation of what you're going to get. And obviously half of it's blocked out, especially when you've got this giant big hood on the front. Half of it's blocked out by that.
So if you get an M8, you have to work by a whole different set of equivalent focal lengths to the now common 1.5 times. Not full frame, but there are things to appreciate about that.
One thing I used to like when I had the M8 was that I had a 15mm 1.3 times crop. It was about a 21, is that right? 21? You can just guesstimate the focus, you don't need to use the rangefinder. That's the quickest way of focusing. Here's the learning bit.
Right, so put it on f8, and if I focus at 2 meters, this little scale on the lens where it's marked 8 shows me that everything between there and there is actually going to be more or less in focus. I mean, it isn't actually in focus, it's just kind of the appearance of being in focus. So in this case, if I set it at f8, everything from infinity through to 1 meter should be in focus. And as you can see, at f1.8 you get diddly squat, and if you had f0.95 it'd be like a little thin line. So to practice that, I'm going to stand here photographing this bit of wall, focus set at 1.5 meters, just wait for people to walk by and press the button, and hopefully they'll be in focus.
Having to use a wider lens without being effectively really wide means more depth of field, thus easier to focus quickly and accurately. The only problem with crop, of course, though, is if you want to take really wide shots.
Well, if you're looking for cheap Leicas, you can't get any cheaper than the M8. If you work backwards from 11, that should be the crappest, I mean the cheapest. It's even cheaper than an Epson RD1. Epson RD1, I used to have one of those. Epson make printers, but they also make digital cameras with a film winding crank.
I'm not yanking your crank, a digital camera with a winding lever, not for film but to recock the shutter. Just as well because the battery life was atrocious. Just 6 megapixels, but a great camera that I used on my travels.
That I bought for £1,300 way back. Still £1,300 now. M8 is cheaper than that. Although it is kind of flawed, it does suffer from some IR issues.
The IR filter was too weak. Problems can often be seen with black fabrics looking a bit violet. There's also severe colour cast on ultra-wide lenses like the Voigtlander 15mm or 12mm, but on the other hand, the M8 is a fantastic black and white camera because of the weak IR filter. And colour cast not an issue in monochrome for obvious reasons.
And because it takes so long to save to the card, it doesn't have to wait for about an hour to find out what it's actually going to look like. That is one thing, right, that I don't like about the M8, is that it just takes forever. No matter how fast the card you put in, it just takes forever to actually save it and then load. So if I shoot this now, okay, and then look at, like, that's going to flash, and if I want to blow it up, it's still pixely pixel. Now it's probably just freaked out because I've been pressing buttons while it's trying to record itself. Okay, now it's just stopped. Battery flat maybe?
Don't worry, Dan, it worked out alright, but it must be said that the sluggishness is a problem with the full-frame M9 too.
You got a chain on it, look at you. Or hipster.
Yeah, it's hipster chain. So what do you reckon, internet people?
Should Dan
The thing
buy
about
it?
the internet is, and this shop, is that by the time this video goes live,
Yeah,
if I don't
you'd-
buy it, somebody else will have bought it. So it's a bit pointless. It's got a bit too much patina for me. Can you paint it pink?
I can do that.
Yeah.
You buy it first and I'll paint it.
It's not exactly very good at 6400 ISO though.
Poor high ISO performance is the least of the worries about the M9 though.
Another problem that the M9 had was corrosion. The CCD sensors, they corroded, which is a bit of a problem. And they would actually replace it.
Not anymore though.
They've stopped doing it. So do check if it's been fixed, repaired, replaced. So maybe you should just skip the M9. You either go for the M8 or, my choice, the M Type 240. Type without an E. 240 is 240. So I've got the M Type 240, which I think can be had for around a little over 2G. Is that right? You always check prices, don't you? Around £2,000?
Gone up a bit, I would say. Maybe, yeah, for
Bit
an
more?
for
2,500?
a really nice one, £2,500.
Yeah, so around, you probably get that for around $2,500, $3,000, which I went for. I know I slated this when it first came out because I said it was big and fat. It was alright. There are bigger and fatter cameras around. It's not an M10, sure, but then it's not M10 prices. But M10 prices are coming down too, which means this is going to be cheaper. Well, the M9 has got a CCD sensor, which they say looks more film-like, but then the ISO doesn't go very high, so you get more noise. This uses a CMOS sensor, which you might say could look like any other camera, but it's still got Leicas colour signs and stuff like that. Plus, it's a little bit better when it comes to low light stuff. Less noise.
With a 24 megapixel sensor, it has enough resolution. Playback won't make you feel like it's outdated tech, and apart from the chunkier body and use, it's every bit as good as an M11. Because Leica is not all about fancy automated features.
You're going to put it in A. Is that controversial?
No, not all.
Never use A.
Whatever. You always use M mode, do you?
Used to. That A didn't work out so well. Especially when it's backlit like that. The A just completely messed it up. So there you go. Should have used M.
It's a bit different with Leicas, I think. Sometimes the auto exposure is not really that reliable.
See, automated features not fancy at all. With all Leica M's, it's better to do everything manual. That is the beauty of it.
The great thing with Leica is that they hardly evolve, so you don't have to worry about auto-focusing systems or continuous burst rates because it doesn't have auto-focusing. Anyway, you don't take bursts with Leicas, do you? It's all about taking the decisive moment, one shot here and there, every 3 hours or so.
And that's the great thing, whether it's M8 or M-Type 240, in terms of performance, it's effectively as good as your hands and eyes are. That makes those cheaper options every bit as good as an M11, but for less money.
It's a very connected feeling shooting a rangefinder. I used to hate these for work. Like I wouldn't use one to do like hard news because it's just not. No, in some ways it's not fast enough. But if you're just shooting personal stuff or you're shooting reportage, it's great. Although I always find it funny that people associate these with a decisive moment. Well, I just kind of think this is not what you would use to get a decisive moment. You would use, in those days a Canon DSLR, and then these days some Sony Alpha.
It might sound a bit silly, but it's just a great way of taking photos.
So if you could allocate about 2K for a nice body, that would get you a nice M-Type 240, which would be my choice, and it is my choice because I bought one myself. Or you could go cheaper, the M8, or you could buy a power drill to fit in some lovely sound effects into video, but you could pay a bit more to get M9, which is full frame. But then you might have the sensor corrosion issue, so you should look out for that. And if you don't like Leica M's at all, if you just want to shoot Leica, mainly for the red dot on front of the camera, to show off to your mates that you're rich, but you're not actually rich, you're buying the cheap ones, then you can go for the SL, which is a nice full-frame mirrorless camera. Look, I'm over here, by the way. What are you doing?
Whoa.
Jeez, are you filming? Ah, people are going to think that we just shot this completely half-assed.
Talking about half-assed, if you want to do Leica without an M, there's a good option.
But an SL, that's a pretty good bargain, I think. £1,300. Unfortunately, it does say Leica twice on the camera.
It's got absolutely one of the best EVS in the business on here, which I really, really like. The other thing I really, really, really like is that punch into magnify thing. So, you know, other cameras have punch into magnify, but just having it there and the speed at which you can do it, and then the way you can just sort of toggle it around and then just come out of it is amazing.
It looks kind of pretty as well.
Yeah, I think looks are really, I mean, this divided tons of people, you know, in terms of a physical camera to hold, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think, especially if you've got bigger hands. I mean, my hands are medium sized, but if you've got big hands, that grip is really nice.
Well, when you compare like a Sony grip to that, this is far better.
Or an M8, a non-existent M grip, like the grip difference between that and that is, I mean, it's almost as big. Look, if you look at the grip of the thing that way, it's almost as big as the thing that way.
And also, you can't say that that's a Panasonic with a Leica badge on it, because this predated the Panasonic full-frame camera.
But this is so quick, especially coming from an M. This is really, really quick. Somehow, it feels more tactile and Leica-like. Well, not somehow. It's metal. It's built beautifully. You know, compared to that, these are worlds apart.
Don't think of the SL as a cop-out. For those who can't deal with the rangefinder M, you can mount M lenses on. It's a Leica. It has peaking. You can zoom in to check focus, and alright, it's a bit of a cop-out. But it's really cheap and it says Leica on the front, okay? So bye now. Thanks for watching. See you later. Goodbye!
Oh no, I've got some sauce on it. There's tomato sauce, or was it beef juice? I think it's tomato sauce. Oh man. Lick it off.
It's a different kind of red dot.
It's here as well. It's everywhere. Let's have a chip.
No wonder it's everywhere.
And there is me wondering how I got ketchup on my line. Did you get that? You see, they're talking about corrosion. Grit, the salt, can cause corrosion. Subtle art.
You're posing like a Leica photographer now.
Dan's going to eat outside the ivy and pretend he's eating in the ivy. Just outside a public toilet as well.
You look like a serious Leica photographer.